How's it going, folks? Welcome back to the channel. So today I'm talking about Eddie Howe and whether or not he would be a good fit for the Celtic job. Obviously, Neil Lennon is still in a job, but I'm going to be talking about hypotheticals today. Would Eddie Howe be a good replacement for Neil Lennon when and if the Celtic board decide to get rid of him? Let's get into the video. So before I get into Eddie Howe, I do want to thank you all for subscribing so far. I've reached 1,000 subscribers. It was a goal of mine to get here. I'm really grateful for everyone who has subscribed, but about 80% of people who are still watching these videos are not subscribed. So please, if you do enjoy watching the videos, hit the subscribe button below and you'll get notified every time one goes live. So let's talk about Eddie Howe and whether or not he would be a good fit for the Celtic job. So I'm going to break it into pros and cons because obviously Eddie Howe is linked heavily with the Celtic job, but there's no confirmation of whether there's any actual basis to that or if it's just speculation so far. So let's talk about Eddie Howe and whether or not he would be a good fit for the Celtic manager. I'll start with the pros. So obviously Eddie Howe is a manager whose stock rose really fast, really quickly as he progressed with Bournemouth through the Championship and into the Premier League, and the brand of football was definitely something that was lauded over him as something that he was very good at doing. And the side that he took into the Premier League were more attractive to watch than the traditional sides that would come up from the Championship and sort of park the bus and play defensively. He played on the attack, and that was something he was given a lot of credit for. So let's start with the pros. So the pro number one would be his coaching ability. He clearly has an ability to make players better, an ability to make players who played at a lower standard raise their game and play at a higher level, because he took Bournemouth from the third division of English football into the Premier League, and he still had several starters in that side that were with him in the third division playing Premier League football. So clearly he has an ability to make those players better as they progress up through the levels. And where that transitions into Celtic would be taking them from the Scottish League, where it's playing at a lower standard, into the Champions League and Europa League. Obviously, you have to think about the fact that some of these players may not have any experience playing there, so you have to think about the coaching and how you address and how you approach the games compared to how you would approach it, say, if you're playing the likes of RB Salzburg in the Europa League. How would you transition your game plan from that to playing Kilmarnock on a plastic pitch in January when it's freezing cold? So that's what you have to think about when you're a Celtic manager. A pro would definitely be his coaching ability, and he has shown that throughout the years. He also has a good eye for talent, the likes of Nathan Ake, Philip Billing and Tyrone Mings. He took them when they were really young, and now Nathan Ake is playing for Man City, Tyrone Mings is playing for Aston Villa, starting in the Premier League, and Philip Billing is quite a good player as well. He hasn't developed as far as the other two, but he did show real potential. Another pro for Eddie Howe is that he is an experienced manager in working with a budget, and that is something that you have to get used to when you go up to Scotland. Even though Celtic are the biggest club and clearly have a bigger budget, and I understand that there might be people watching this video who support lower sides in the Scottish League and think that Celtic have this unbelievable budget, but in comparison to the sides that they're playing in Europe, Celtic's budget is really small, really tight. So you have to be able to think about that. You have to be able to work within a budget, and you have to have an eye for talent that you can get on the cheap and flip a few years later for 20-30 million if you bring them in for 3 to 5 million. So an example of this is, I will come back to this and is working within a budget, because that is also a con. So his last year in the Championship, he brought in Callum Wilson for 3 million. He went on to be one of their star strikers in the Premier League, still playing Premier League football. Andrew Sermon as well was a key player for them when they were getting up into the Premier League, and a couple of years after that. And then Arthur Burke came in on loan. That's their final year in the Championship. Once they get into the Premier League, you can question whether or not he was buying the players or what was going on with the budget. That I will address that in the cons later on. Mainly, the biggest pro that you're looking at with Eddie Howe, apart from the coaching ability, is the attacking brand of football. So this is something I touched on a little bit earlier in the video. He clearly wants to play on the front foot, not defensively. He takes a proactive approach to the game and not a reactive approach. So that is a massive pro when you're thinking about Eddie Howe coming to Celtic, because as a Celtic boss, you don't want to be pragmatic as such. You want to be pragmatic enough in Europe when you come up against better sides. You want to have a different game plan. You want to be able to play against those bigger sides and control the game somewhat so that you're not getting completely dominated. But in the Scottish League, you are expected to dominate the game. So you need to be able to have a game plan that is proactive enough that you're keeping the ball. The best brand of football that Celtic have played in years was under Brendan Rodgers, where we're just taking control of the game possession-wise, really fast transitions through the lines and getting loads of goals. That's what you want to see when you're supporting Celtic, and I think Eddie Howe would bring that to the club, because he not only did he have a proactive game plan, he also had a couple of them, so it wasn't limited to a high press or getting the ball up into the forward line really quickly. It was, when he first came, they were a really tidy team in possession. There was just short passing triangles, keeping the ball, dominating the possession, and then working it through, pulling the opposition out of their shape, and then working it through the lines. And then as they progressed, as they got a bigger budget, they sort of changed their transfer policy, brought in faster players, more powerful players, and they played a lot quicker. They played a high press, they played a high defensive line. We'll also come back to this brand of football later on when I go to the cost as well. So speaking of cost, another pro for Eddie Howe is that he is cost effective. So Eddie Howe's brand, his stock is low at the minute because he left Bournemouth after he got relegated from the Premier League. He was at one point in time, he was being pegged as the next England manager. He was linked with the Arsenal job very heavily. That's not happening now. He is probably a championship level manager when you're thinking of stock. So he would be cheap to get in and his wages wouldn't be astronomical. So Celtic might, and I say might, be able to afford him, because Celtic's budget is gone at the end of this year because of the COVID, and I think that's going to limit who they get in. But I think Eddie Howe is actually affordable. So that's a massive pro for Eddie Howe. Let's go on to the cons, because there are a couple of cons as well. He's not just all glory. One of the main cons, and it's something that everyone will have touched on, and it's something that even if he gets a job, it will be the first question: can he do it at a bigger club? Because he is unproven at a bigger club so far. He tried to go to Burnley and it didn't work out for him. And Bournemouth, there is a massive difference between managing Bournemouth and managing Celtic. So without insulting Bournemouth, they're a Premier League side, but they're a relegation battler Premier League side. They're down the south east coast. There's only one club really around that, and that's Brighton. They only have a 13,000 stadium. That is a massively different situation than managing in Scotland, and especially managing Glasgow, where you have two clubs, the hatred is there, the rivalry is there, both teams are going for the title, and there's 60,000 fans in the stadium. Hopefully we'll get back to that at some stage soon, but there's 60,000 people in the stadium chanting your name if you're doing well, booing you and hissing you and bringing up different banners for your head if you're not doing well. That's the difference between managing Bournemouth and managing Celtic. And loads of people have spoken about this. Even the likes of Graham Souness, who played in the European Cup, talked about the pressure and the feeling of always being in Glasgow and the heat and the anger in that city when it comes to managing football. That's the difference. You don't get that in Bournemouth, so that would be a massive thing for him to address. And there is a pressure that comes with being relegation battlers in the Premier League. It's different to managing the likes of, say, Newcastle or someone who has been mid-table Premier League and they're safe enough there. You know they're not going to get relegated. You know they're not going to push for Europe. That's different to managing Bournemouth. There is pressure, but it's not the same type of pressure. It's a pressure to not get relegated as opposed to pressure to win trophies year in, year out, win every single game. Does Eddie Howe have that in him? He played at a high standard. He managed at a high standard. I would like to think that he does have it, but he would need a couple of months at least to get working with these players and get his game plan going, because you don't want it to be him getting a job in August and then starting off and you have a slow start because he's trying to bring in his coaching standards. He's trying to change things. He needs to be hired probably immediately if you want him to be as effective as he can be. Another issue, and it's something that I touched on, he does work well within a budget, but the issue for me is that when he was actually given a budget, he didn't spend it well at all. So when Bournemouth had secured Premier League for like a third year in a row and the money was there, it was flowing, spent 20 million on Dominic Solanke, spent 20 million on Jordan Ibe, brought in players like Junior Stanislas. So there is a record there of poor recruitment as well. Whether or not that was down to him or whether or not that was down to the scouts, I don't know. None of us really know, but that would be a concern if he was given a budget and he didn't spend it well. Then that's the year out of the that's a year done. So you need to spend it well. When you have a budget as small as Celtics, you need to be scouting properly. That clearly hasn't happened over the last couple of years, but it's something that really needs to be addressed. And finally, another con, and something again that I touched on earlier on, is his game plan. So his game plan is proactive, it's on the front foot, it is very effective at times, but it is also very susceptible to attacks and counter-attacks and leaking goals. And that's something that has been part of Eddie Howe's CV over the last couple of years, is that his team, while they play nice football, they're also very leaky at the back. They concede a lot of goals. Now, the one thing that you can say on that is that when you're playing teams like Ross County and Kilmarnock, that's not going to happen. You know, it's not the same as playing against United, Liverpool, Chelsea, City, all these teams, Arsenal, that are on the top of the table. They won't punish you as much up in Scotland, except for maybe Rangers, maybe Hibs, maybe Aberdeen at times, Ross County this year. You know, these are the sides that you wouldn't traditionally think would score that many goals against Celtic, but if you have a leaky defence, they will. That's happened this year. It's proven this year. So you would like to think that Eddie Howe has taken this year out, thought about what he was doing as a manager, and maybe learn from his mistakes and knows how to seal up that back a little bit. That would be a worry. And finally, the last con for Eddie Howe is that when things went against them, he did very little to turn it around. So we're looking at the biggest nosedive in history for Celtic at the minute with Neil Lennon. Last year it was the same. There was a massive nosedive, but we were able to pick the form back up because the players knew how to do it. They knew how to win. This year has been a shit show completely. But Eddie Howe, when his teams just about survived the last 2 years and then nosedived again the following year and did little to turn it around. So that's a real worry for me, because you want your manager to, in the crisis points, to be able to turn things around and work with the players and trust the process, and it turns around and you do well. That's what you want from your manager. Eddie Howe hasn't really shown that over the last couple of years. Maybe he will, and maybe he has developed it again, but that would be a worry. I don't know about Eddie Howe. I think he would be an excellent appointment in my personal opinion, but there are definite worries there. I would raise concerns about him coming up, as well as just jumping on the bandwagon and saying he would be a great appointment just because of how bad Neil Lennon is doing at the minute. There is worries with every manager, but do the pros outweigh the cons? That's the question. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below, and again, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll be back again with more videos this week. I'm Andy Call, has been calling it. Thanks for watching.